Hey, welcome to for National Safeguarding Awareness Week. This one today we're talking about doorstep crime, so we hope you find it really interesting. You might have just heard Chelsea saying that she was going to record it, just to let you know. You might want to turn your cameras off. And I just mentioned about keeping yourself on mute. That'd be fantastic if you could just mute yourself. Also to let you know that the slides will be available on the website. We'll send you an email when they're all uploaded. Okay. So just to introduce myself, my name is Paula Ward. I'm the board manager for Thurrock Safeguarding Adults Board, and I'm just going to be introducing the speaker today. So I've just mentioned there about keeping your microphones off. Hope everyone can hear fine. If I've got any questions, please put them in the chat as we're going along. What we'll do is we'll have time at the end to answer some questions. So the comment section will be really, really helpful if you can pop any questions there and we can ask our speaker.
Can I just request all cameras off, please, apart from the speakers?
So just to click your camera off, there's a camera button at the top right-hand side. If you just click that on, that'd be perfect. Any questions that we don't get a chance to answer, we'll pop on the website. Okay, so what is a safeguarding board and what do we do? So within Essex, there are 3 Safeguarding Adults Board, one in Southend, one in Essex and one in Thurrock. As it says on the slide, we're a statutory board. Our duties are set out within the Care Act. And essentially what we have to do is set out through our strategic plans how we are going to safeguard adults with care and support needs. Can I just ask everyone to put themselves on mute, please? I can just hear some feedback. If you want to see our strategic plans for each of the 3 boards, please just pop along and have a look at the 3 websites because they're all publicly available. Okay, what we're going to do now is just do a very quick poll. In the comment section, there'll be a link to, you can just click on the link. Okay, I think that's due to appear shortly. You'll be taken to the Slido webpage. When you get there, you just need to enter the 4-digit PIN, which is on the screen now. So in the comment section, you can see a link, www.sli.do/. So if you click on that, you'll be asked to pop in the PIN, which is 1703. Okay. You'll be asked questions, so you just need to pop the PIN in on the web page. Okay, so click on the web page, pop the PIN in, and you should see the screen. Okay, you'll be asked a question. PIN in web page, not chat.
There's a few people saying it in the chat, just so that you know, you have to go over to the web page.
Okay. So the first question we're going to ask you is, do you know where to report a safeguarding concern? So if I give you a few minutes and another minute to answer that question. So you need to click on the link, the Slido link, and then enter the PIN. You'll be asked to do this again later on, so it's worth keeping the page open. So 66 people have answered already. So for those people that are just coming in, we're just doing a quick poll. Don't worry, don't still be able to see the results. Okay, so on the screen you should be able to see 81 people have answered and 90% of you knew where to report a safeguarding concern, which is really positive. So like I said, we are going to be popping back to Slido later on, the very end, so just keep the page open. The next screen, we're going to pop the presentation back up, and the next screen will be the contact details for each of the different local authorities. There we go. So most people did know what to do if they had a safeguarding concern that they wanted to raise, but just to remind people that weren't sure, within Essex, there's 3 different local authorities, Southend, Essex and Thurrock. So what you have on the screen is the phone number and the email address. And the form that you need to complete is called a SETSAF. And again, that's available on all 3 board websites. We will be emailing you a copy of the slides, so you will have the email address and contact numbers after today. So, National Safeguarding Week. This was launched by Aincraft Trust in 2008, and what they wanted to do was really raise awareness of safeguarding adults. There's lots of other awareness raising campaigns, but they really wanted to highlight the themes that fall under the safeguarding umbrella. So we've continued with this within Southend, Essex and Thurrock, and this week we're focusing on financial abuse. So we have a series of webinars this week, the first one today, and we've got another one Wednesday and Thursday. If you haven't already booked on, there's still time. Please just have a look at the website, and you've still got time to book on if you want to. So today we're going to be talking around about doorstep crime, rogue trading and scams, and our Richards from standards within Essex County Council. Okay, so if I hand over to Alan and you can start the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Paula. I'll wait for the presentation to come up, but in the meantime I'll just give a very quick overview of who I am and what Trading Standards does in case you haven't encountered us before. So I'm an operation manager within Essex County Council Trading Standards. We are a county-wide team, fairly small, operating out of County Hall. There's about 22 of us, and we have a lot of enforcement kind of roles and a very varied kind of role, everything from weights and measures through to welfare of farm animals, safety of products, food composition and standards, product safety, counterfeiting products, you name it, we do it basically. And doorstep crime is a very important but quite a small element of that. As part of our role, we obviously safeguard and protect or attempt to safeguard and protect the consumers of Essex from rogue trading and doorstep crime. So very keen to build up our capacity to deal with that, and that's part of the reason why I'm very excited to be able to talk to you today, because obviously we do want to improve our kind of doorstep crime response, and part of that is engaging with partners, hopefully that are here today. Just as a I'm going the main elements of doorstep crime, the problem areas that are reported to us at Essex Trading Standards, the trading methods and the difficulties of investigating doorstep criminals, a little bit of information about the victims of doorstep crime and the financial losses that are suffered across the county. And then hopefully at the end, we're going to have an opportunity to have a question and answer and discussion about the role of adult social care and trading standards. So moving on, what is doorstep crime? So there isn't a kind of a standard definition, if you like. However, Doorstep crime can be defined as basically offenders generally cold calling at the homes of consumers, and most commonly they are older adults or vulnerable consumers, although not exclusively. It tends to involve property repairing, such as roofing, tarmacking, block paving, fascia and soffit installations, and gardening work. Although it can also be products, and I put in there we can include things like fish. Believe it or not, it seems to be a commodity which is incorrectly being sold to our Essex consumers. Furniture, mobility aids, security systems, energy saving products, things like that. Generally speaking, the are often unnecessary. Regularly we visit, people who have had roofing work where we look at neighbouring properties, and you can see that products are just not so unnecessary. They're just not needed at all. In terms of pricing, we'll go on to talk about that a little bit more in a bit more depth, but obviously, basically they're out to get as much money as they can. So they generally tend to be overpriced and, as I say, unnecessary. Frequently the work itself either isn't commenced. If they can get a big enough deposit up front, the work might not be started at all. And obviously the work might also not be finished. So, there can be an intervention, obviously an enforcement intervention, which means the work doesn't get finished. But quite frequently, if they've had enough money, or they don't think they can get enough or any more money, then frequently the work is just unfinished. And of course, it goes without saying that the product itself or the service that's carried out generally is of poor quality. I put in the elements of repeat victimisation and grooming. Frequently we see consumers being repeat targeted until they're effectively milked for all of their savings, and that can be for by the same companies or persons linked to them. So we'll talk about organised crime a little bit later, and the fact that these tend to be sort of groups of people that operate together, and we'll see details of one victim unfortunately passed between members of that group. Frequently it can involve elements of intimidation and aggressive behaviour towards the consumer. It goes without saying that some people can become aware, obviously, of the situation that they're in, and therefore be reluctant, obviously, to give any more money. And frequently that can then result in intimidation or aggressive behaviour, or either that or to prevent access to enforcement agencies. So just move to the next slide. Okay, so unsurprisingly, this slide really just summarises the complaints that we received into Essex Trading Standards over a 2-year period. So we've talked about the definition of doorstep crime, and this particular chart here is very specific about dealing with doorstep crime, and it summarises really the main trades and sectors that we see. And as you can see, number one trade is roofing, and that includes any works really to roofs. Frequently we're talking about elderly and vulnerable people who can't access their own roofs. So it's a very good vehicle really for extorting money out of unwary consumers who perhaps aren't aware of any problems on their roofs. But that's quickly followed by gardening and tree surgery work, followed by paving driveways, and of course there's a sliding scale there. So that is just the complaints that are received by Essex County Council Trading Standards that relate to what I regard as pure doorstep crime. There are other, obviously, missing of product in this table. If we can move on to the next slide. So the trading methods of doorstep criminals. As you can see there by the slide, I put in itinerant traders. There's no secret really that the perpetrators of this type of crime tend to be, but not exclusively, from within the travelling community. And of course, there are obvious difficulties in terms of tracing those individuals. Part of that is around the trading names that they used and the methods that they used. They will use flyers with different company names, sometimes using the same telephone numbers, but they will frequently obviously change their telephones and contact details. And of course, they won't give out genuine contact details to anyone that they're facilitate money laundering. It's becoming increasingly frequent that unwary third parties will be involved in moving money or receiving goods or services in relation to the crime that's being committed. And of course, you know, the number one commodity that they want out of anyone is of course cash, because it's untraceable and there's obvious difficulties in you know, tracing these individuals if we've got no names, vehicle registration numbers, which are sometimes falsified, or sometimes vehicles are lent around amongst the traders, and we've got no other real means of tracing them if we haven't got any bank accounts. And that's why the use of the third parties is a good buffer, I guess, between enforcement agencies and of course the actual perpetrator themselves. I put in there the phrase legitimate guise, and we're finding this much more frequently. So what we will find in some instances, but not exclusively, is the use of limited companies, which are formed quite easily on Companies House currently, with potentially false identification. So we'll have limited company names, websites, and other sort of third-party facilitators being used to offer a sense of legitimacy for doorstep criminals. Frequently, we've got things like, I won't name them, but trader review sites, trader obtaining sites, which are used in order to give a sense of legitimacy of what is an otherwise illegitimate business. And there are obvious links to the perpetrators who carry out this sort of crime in relation to other types of criminality. I don't know if we've got any police in the room today, as it were, but we've certainly seen links from some of the individuals that we've looked at in terms of distraction, burglary, theft of items from rural and residential premises, and the utilisation of slave labour, to actually carry out work. Because frequently we're talking things like, you know, as well as roofing, we're talking things like driveway replacement. So obviously it's quite a labour intensive service. And of course, you know, no one wants to get their hands dirty if they can employ someone on next to nothing to actually carry out the work for them. So there's a definite link to slave labour, and that's well established. Okay, so if we can move on to the next slide. So what do we know about the victims of doorstep crime? Now, the table that you can see in front of you here is one that was carried out in 2017 by my colleagues in the East Midlands. So this is based on 1,277 records from 8 different authorities collected over the course of a year. And what you can see in front of you is the typical victim of doorstep crime. So there are two columns here. One is all doorstep criminals and those that are repeat victims, and you can see they're fairly similar in that generally the gender of a doorstep victim is generally female, but not exclusively. There's a slight bias towards females, and that's both in relation to initial victims and repeat victims, although it becomes slightly larger in repeat victims. Their average age is around 75, but then rising to 79 years in terms of the average age of repeat victims. And you can see there that they frequently live alone, which perhaps is unsurprising, especially in terms of repeat victims. But what is surprising is that frequently, both for initial victims and also repeat victims, is that they have family in the area. We often talk about isolation, vulnerability, and age really being the factors for victims of doorstep crime. But as you can see, it isn't necessarily a barrier having family in the area that you'd think would be looking out for them. There's other information there which gives you an idea that, you know, they may have had recent bereavement. Frequently, when we're talking about this age group, and it's no surprise to you guys, they will have a carer in some form of disability. What we found quite interesting is the fact that part of our work protecting consumers is we initiate things called no-code calling zones, which are designed to educate zones. But as you can see, 5% or in fact 8% of victims also live in no-code calling zones, which means that, you know, the perpetrators are operating in those zones, and just the education work that we've done in order to facilitate a no-code calling zone doesn't necessarily protect the consumer from being a victim of doorstep crime. So moving on to the next slide, we now are looking at the financial loss. This again is based on the purely the complaints that are made to Essex Trading Standards, so the 242 that we referred to earlier on. And this table shows you the total loss within that trade sector, the minimum loss, the maximum loss, and of course the average loss for those trade sectors. I won't dwell on this too much, but obviously you can see that just from the complaints that we dealt with in relation to general building work, we had one victim who paid over £106,000. The average loss for general building work is 27,000. We break that down obviously by crime type because it helps us to kind of define where we want to put our resources and where we can have the most impact. But I guess one of the overall figures is that the average loss for victim of doorstep crime is around about 7,000, just over 7,300 in relation to the victims that we deal with in trading standards. So if we can move on to the next slide. Obviously, we mentioned there kind of some of the statistics, and we talk about the average victim of doorstep crime, and we talk about their age, but obviously we can lose sight of the impact on the victim. So what I'd like to do now is we basically produced a fairly light-hearted video within trading standards, which is designed to highlight the fact that we need to help protect and educate families and victims of doorstep crime. I'd just like to play that for you now.
There you go.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
There's your sherry, Aunt Janice.
Oh, thank you, dear. And, did you get one for Raymond?
Raymond, who's Raymond?
Oh, he's my builder. Or should I say, my knight in shining armour.
Builder?
Yes. Do you know, if he hadn't been passing by the house, I'd never have known about the loose tiles on the roof. I mean, the leaks would have been dreadful. You'll never believe what else he found when he was up there. More than you can see from the ground. And the state of the gutters. Oh. It's not cheap. I do say you get what you pay for. You know, sometimes. But he does do jobs when I don't even ask him. Even when I insist that he really, really shouldn't. He prefers cash.
I bet he does.
No VAT. Oh, can you get me a lager next time?
How do you know you can trust this guy?
Gavin, how could you? Really, I had expected better manners. Look, he's got a leaflet and everything. There, dear, he didn't mean it. Are you all right?
I think I need a little bit of time on my own.
Oh, yes, of course you do.
I'll pop round later for a cup of tea, though.
Oh, no, I'll get your favourite Vicky's in. I hope you're pleased with yourself.
But there's plenty of other builders that you could use.
Oh, I know. I mean, people are so very kind and helpful. In fact, I seem to have had a run of luck with them lately. And not just builders either. This is Luke. He's terribly clever. It's going to help me with my finances. Oh, I must drink up. It's going to take me to the cash point, aren't you?
Are rogue traders scamming someone you care about? We're here to make sure they don't get away with it. If you're worried, call 03454 040506 for advice, or report your suspicions to Essex Police. Follow Essex Trading Standards on Facebook and Twitter for regular posts on rogue traders and fake leafleting. And for absolute peace of mind, use an honest trader from the Buy with Confidence scheme, the only scheme vetted and approved by Trading Standards.
All right, thank you. I don't know if that came out well for everyone else. It's a little bit shaky for me, but I don't know, maybe that's my connection. So moving on a little bit then, hopefully you recognise some of the faces from there as well. We got a good buy-in on that video. It was quite well received. Looking at the population of Essex, now this is really important. We've talked about the fact that doorstep criminals tend to focus and target elderly and vulnerable people. So it's obviously quite important that we understand their population and the impact that that's going to have going forward. Now, I expect there's professionals in this room who are much more knowledgeable on this subject than me, but just some basic information in terms of our population, both currently and going forward. As you can see, there's a graph there with our total population size and also the predicted numbers age 65 and over, not only in terms of age, but predicted to have dementia. And as you can see, that's a slightly upward curve. So effectively the pool of potential victims is obviously going to increase. And of course, as we mentioned before, the victims of doorstep crime tend to live alone. So the predicted population that do live alone is obviously a key to us. So it looks like, as I say, the number of consumers who potentially could be targeted will only increase. There are studies which have, by Age UK and the Alzheimer's Society, which basically indicated that 62% of carers of people with dementia have reported that the person they care for had been approached by unsolicited or unscrupulous cold callers or doorstep people. And about 15% of carers surveyed said the person they care for had either been approached by rogue traders trying to sell them needless items or building work, or had actually had unnecessary work done. So if we use those statistics at those percentages, clearly, we're talking about a large percentage of the population, a number of individuals will be targeted through their life in relation to sales of unnecessary overpriced work. So it's quite important that we understand the demand going forward for this service. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So it would be wrong of me not to mention our enforcement partners in this, the police, who have at least an equal role in relation to doorstep crime as us. I mentioned before that there's an overlap in the crimes that are perpetrated by doorstep criminals in terms of theft and obviously slave labour, which clearly are police functions. Frequently we find individuals that we're looking at in terms of doorstep crime have got P&C records relating to either or both of those or fraud related offences. So my colleagues in the police also assisted with the banking protocol. And for those of you that aren't aware of it, basically financial institutions like banks have been trained in all potential victims of doorstep crime or scam or rogue trading or fraud, and obviously to question those consumers who are perhaps in the bank or financial institution, or increasingly now as well making bank transactions through internet. And basically, if they believe that there is an issue with that person being a victim, then they will make a call to the banking protocol, and the police then will respond. So I don't know if you can really see the numbers in relation to this slide, but if I just run through it briefly, let's make it a little bit bigger on my screen. So basically, in 2019, Essex Police received 252 banking protocol calls. Of those 252 calls, 108 were assessed as being criminal. So obviously there will be a certain degree of legitimate trade, and there's no crime there, but obviously around about 40% of all the crimes that were of all the calls that they received, they believed to be a crime. Those resulted in 7 arrests and 47 concerns raised for the adults that were actually the victims of those. There's a little bit of information there, if you can see, is that the average to a banking call is 70.8 years. And there's a bit of information about whether or not they're male and female, which differs slightly in that they tend to be male, only very slightly. The total value of the harm which has been prevented in relation to the 108 that they responded to and obviously deemed to be criminal is 1.2 million, and the average loss is around about £11,400. Also, in relation to police activity, it would be fair to say that it's a fairly I guess fractured kind of method of reporting these sorts of crimes. Basically, they can come through to trading standards, they can go through to police direct, they can go through to citizens advice consumer services, or they can come and report a crime to action fraud, which is kind of police depository of information which is maintained by City of London Police. I managed to access some of the action fraud data. In 2019, 77 of those reports relating to doorstep crime. And as you can see there, the total loss in relation to financial loss is 754,000 at an average of £12,160, which kind of analogous to the reports that we've received in trading standards. So moving on to the next slide. Okay, now this relates to the financial loss to Essex residents. Now, as you can see, I've combined basically the number of reports that we received in Essex trading standards that are received as a result of the banking protocol and the reports to action fraud. So this in 2019, basically the total number of reports is around 306. Tells us our total recorded loss, which is 2.874 million, and the average recorded loss across all 3 of the reporting methods. So this gives us some quite good information there. Now, there have been studies which basically talk about the reporting rates. In fact, can we go back one slide? I think we might have skipped forward 2 there. Okay, yeah, we did. Okay, so basically it's an underreported problem. Now, there's been studies taken out nationally which seem to indicate that the actual reporting rates are only 10 to 20% of the actual number of crimes that are carried out. Okay, and there's a number of reasons for that. Now, mostly it can be around fear of, for the consumer, around fear of results. So obviously there's of the people that are actually carrying out the crimes. There's the fear of the justice system or knowing how to report it. So we're talking here about people perhaps not having the confidence or the know-how or the ability to actually report it, not knowing whether it's an issue for trading standards, for the police, where to seek advice. We're perhaps not as accessible as we used to be as a service. So how do people actually get that information through to us or the police? And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. And we talked about citizens advice direct to us, action fraud, for example. And I think it would be fair to say that police in a similar method to us perhaps aren't as accessible as they used to be when there perhaps was a Bobby on the beat or, more stations were open. The obvious one is a fear of loss of independence. They fear that if they were to report a crime like this, that we as an enforcement agency would be looking at their ability to manage their own affairs. And I guess I'm sure there's people in the room who can relate to that in terms of social care. Want to be their own affairs and their own property. A real problem is the consumers not understanding or accepting they're a victim. So an element of this crime can be repeat victimisation. There can be an element of befriending and socially isolating the consumer. So frequently there's a barrier there to get over, that they will not accept that, initially at least, that they've been a victim of crime and that the people that are perpetrating it are in fact criminals and targeting them for unnecessary works. They may have built up a relationship, and we've got to think about how we perhaps replace that relationship. There is obviously the issue of embarrassment and self-blame, and perhaps being concerned that, you know, even if they do report it, nothing's going to happen. And there is a fairly kind of mixed response, I guess, from all enforcement agencies. So that's something about. So if we can move on to the next slide again. So if we accept that there is a 20% reporting rate, we've told about the total numbers that are reported, so 306. If there is a 20% report rate, that actually means that the likely level of criminality and incidents in one given year within Essex is 1,530 incidents, a total financial loss of around about 14.4 million. You might want to remember that. And if we assume that that is a 10% reporting rate, obviously that doubles again. But I think it's reasonable for us to use the 20% reporting rate for the purposes of kind of measuring effectively the effectiveness of this work. So if we can move on. So in relation to what do we know about adult social care, these are just a various breakdown of 2000. We know that 42 referrals were made or inquiries were reported into adult social care. We know that 4,000 of those people were aged over 65. We know that 735 of that total related to financial or material abuse. What we can't do, or at least what the figures weren't provided to me, is to break that down further to say, well, which of those 735 related to doorstep crime, scams, or other targeting for financial abuse, which has been, you know, is criminal effectively. I would imagine the majority of those would be familial or care workers or care offerers, perhaps, you know, some element of financial abuse in their relationship. But it's important because we need to understand, perhaps going forward, the impact that doorstep crime or other financial abuse as a result of scams has on us both as an authority in terms of the financial impact on the care and cost of care for us as an authority, because it's unfortunately victims of doorstep crime are 2.5 times more likely to either die or to go into residential care than their untargeted peers. So that may well have an impact on us as an authority and as professionals. And studies have shown that 23% of victims of doorstep crime have reported an impact on their health. 12% were left feeling afraid in their own homes, and 13% felt more afraid of crime generally as a result of the incident. So it clearly has a big impact on the individual, and as I say, that can have impact on us as professionals. So moving on to our last slide. So what I'd like, I guess, for a number of you as professionals to take away is basically to consider doorstep crime and other scams as financial abuse. And I know the vast majority of you already will, but obviously doorstep crime, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback from someone there, but obviously doorstep crime, we have made referrals through to adult social care in the past. Quite rightly, perhaps, you know, the level of assessment is around about them being able to manage their affairs, but obviously that does raise concerns with us that perhaps people we consider in trading standards as being vulnerable and being targeted for financial abuse isn't necessarily the same perception that adult social care has. I'd like to encourage practitioners to ask questions when they're meeting their clients. So we're talking about take 5, consider whether or not the person is basically having work done. You want a piece of work to be occurring, and perhaps to ask questions around about how that trade has been sourced, any undue pressure that's been placed upon them. Is there an opportunity to say, you know what, have you got a contract in place? Where did you get your referral from? Just the kind of common sense questions that I'm sure you would ask any family member if they were having work done. So, you know, perhaps being willing to pass that intelligence and the cases between trading standards and adult social care. As I say, we do make referrals fairly infrequently, but we do make referrals to adult social care. And similarly, welcome any intelligence that's coming from yourselves as professionals, which would seem to indicate that perhaps vulnerable people are being targeted by certain businesses. Obviously, there's work we can do around that to, you know, perhaps look at the level of intelligence and see if there is a need for any kind of enforcement assessment. And finally, and most importantly, is basically we'd like to request all agencies and all individuals kind of we're working within this field to basically assist us and generate a little bit of interest, because what we'd like to do is set up a multi-agency team dealing with doorstep crime. That would involve obviously the police, who have been approached already and are positive about it. I must admit, this is something that was quite high on our agenda pre-COVID. One of our sponsors and part of my department is public health, but apparently there's something else going on at the moment which is kind of taking their interest, and obviously is the focus at the moment. So this is something that I'm hoping in the new year to pick up, and we can basically be much more effective when we're dealing with doorstep crime on a multi-agency approach. So that is it for me. I don't know if there's any questions or an opportunity for discussion.
Hi, thank you, Alan. That was really interesting. We have got quite a few questions in the chat function. So if I just start by working my way through them. If anyone else has got any questions, feel free to pop them in. And like I said before, if we don't get a chance to answer all of them, we'll put some answers on the website. Okay, so do you know what Companies House is doing to eliminate these false companies that are registering?
Well, they are becoming a much more efficient. They used to be very much a depository of information, and you could basically start a company up under the name Mickey Mouse. They now are starting to require identification and of course doing some checks, but that is a slow process. And of course there's a lot of companies that are currently on Companies House where we know that the people behind it are untraceable. But they are removing those, and they are being much more active at policing people who are now opening up companies.
Okay, we've got trading standards and police are key agencies to deal with road traders. In which way do the safeguarding teams work with you and work together? So how do you work with social care and safeguarding?
Yeah, okay, so we used to have within trading standards a dedicated doorstep crime lead who was much more active within adult social care and also liaising with police, also liaising both and a district level within the areas within which, you know, we found a lot of incidences of doorstep crime. Unfortunately, we've lost that resource, which is part of the reason why we're trying to generate the new team to build on our current level of doorstep crime activity. And you're right, police are obviously key to this. We've talked about the nature of some of the perpetrators in terms of their mobility. Also, the fact that they are housed, if we are able to house them frequently within traveller sites. We are a civilian enforcement agency. We require the police to assist us if we're carrying out an investigation in terms of tracking, tracing and arresting. We haven't got powers of arrest. So, yes, we need the police very much to be part of this proposed team that we're doing. We envisage adult social care also being an active partner in relation to it. There's been a similar setup in North Yorkshire and they actively have a member of adult social care safeguarding team embedded within the team, or they did have for the first couple of years, and then obviously an ongoing dialogue with social care to ensure that individuals are being safeguarded, because obviously it's easy, well, not easy at all, but it's obvious that our emphasis will be on the enforcement side, but we can't forget the victim. We need adult social care to actively be part of this discussion and any work that goes forward.
Okay, thanks for that. Do you get many referrals? You talked a lot about doorstep crime, but do you get many referrals for people responding to scam letters? So I suppose that you've won the lottery in a different country.
Absolutely. I mean, there isn't time to go through all of the areas of kind of rogue trading that we deal with. Focus really much here on doorstep crime because of the time limitation. But we also receive mass marketing scam information from the National Trading Standards scam team. We have an active program whereby we try to contact people who are current victims of mass marketing scams and also historic victims of mass marketing scams, both in terms of education and obviously intervention if we can do it. Yeah, there isn't the only kind of scam that we deal with. Obviously, we have financial and investment fraud. We've even dealt with romance frauds. We've dealt with a gentleman who invested over £250,000 in financial investment scams and then subsequently in a romance fraud. So, you know, we come across all sorts in trading standards.
And you just mentioned about people losing money. Can people get any of this money back in any way?
Well, the banking protocol can help protect consumers. So there's, in relation to anyone who's targeted unfairly in the branch, as it were, and brought in to remove cash, if they're not questioned in accordance with the requirements of the banking protocol, and nearly every bank is signed up to it now, then they will be liable to get their money back from the bank under the terms of the protocol. That has been extended fairly recently to include bank push fraud. So anyone who's a victim of bank transfer, victim of fraud or doorstep crime, and it's an out of character payment, and the bank could or should have done some work to intervene, and it can be demonstrated they're vulnerable, they could also be protected by the extension of the banking protocol to bank transfer fraud.
Okay. We've also got our close family members included in the stats.
No, we're talking at the moment only of the victims of doorstep crime. I think part of the proposal will obviously have a series of a kind of aims, really, one of which is around the kind of prevent work stream, which will be around about identifying perhaps people who are vulnerable, putting in plans, interventions and education. So yes, we want to work with families and we want to educate families, and that's part of the purpose of that video that we showed you, was just to kind of raise that in a light-hearted way, raise the subject and hopefully make it accessible for people to have those conversations with their family members.
Okay, and we've got, are these stats for the whole of Essex, or they just Essex excluding Thurrock and Southend?
Okay, so the enforcement borders vary slightly, obviously, with us as a county council. As everyone will know, it won't include Southend and Thurrock. So in terms of the trading standard statistics that I showed you earlier on, that is just Essex County Council area. In terms of action of fraud and the banking protocol, that is Greater Essex, because obviously police have a slightly different area to us. So I've had to combine them. So as I say, they're you know, have to be taken with a little pinch of salt, but it's the best I can do.
And I believe Rachel from Thurrock has just put a hand up. Rachel, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I do have statistics for Thurrock. If anybody's interested in seeing them, please do get in touch with me and I can share some of those with you.
Right, well, I'll definitely be in contact, Rachel.
I think you've got them already, Alan.
Ah, there we go.
I believe they were sent over to you recently.
Okay, my apologies.
That's okay.
We do have a series of other questions. We've probably not got time to go through them all, but like I said, we will answer them and then pop them on the website, and we'll send you a link so you can have access to all the other questions, because there's still quite a few left. Should we move on to the quiz now? We've got just a few questions to ask just before we wind up. So if you go to Slido again, there'll be a link in the can pop a link again in the chat section for people that maybe couldn't access it first time round. And the pin is the same, 1703 once you're in the Slido page. Okay, and the first question we're going to ask is, what is the #1 complained about doorstep crime? And then in a minute, Alan, I'll come to you. So we've got quite a few things here: gardening, maintenance, cold calling, building work, driveways. I'm starting to come in quickly now. Quite a lot of cold calling. And more cold calling, building work, paving, tree surgery, gardening. Quite a lot. Alan, do you want to, while people are still doing that, Alan, do you want to give the answer?
Yeah, it was roofing. So out of the 242 complaints we received into Essex Trading Standards, 91 of them related to roofing and that trade.
Excellent. Okay. The next question you're going to be asked is, what is the estimated annual financial loss to the vulnerable residents of Essex as a result of doorstep crime? 14.4 million, 6.3 million, or 11.1 million? So 14.4 so far in the lead. Nearly 75%. Yep, that seems to be the highest one. Alan, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, it was 14.4 million. That's assuming a 20% reporting rate.
Okay, thank you. And the final question we're going to ask is, what is the most important thing you can do to minimise the instances of doorstep crime in the future? So if you just type something in there. Yes, some good answers here. Report concerns, education, ask questions, use reliable traders, increasing awareness. Lots of stuff around awareness. Check on neighbours. Be curious, ask questions. Okay, Alan, do you want to answer that one?
They're all equally valid and they're all excellent. And yeah, I would pick out any number of those as being the correct one, to be honest. But from a very selfish and personal perspective, we'd like to get buy-in from you as professionals to support us in basically initiating a doorstep crime enforcement team. So all of those on an individual basis, equally excellent. But I think as organisations and individuals, we'd like your help to help us prevent to be able to enforce the crime.
Excellent, thank you. So really, I just wanted to say thank you, Alan, for coming to speak about doorstep crime and rogue traders. And thank you everyone for slides popping up, for taking part today. We will answer any of the questions because there's quite a lot of questions that we didn't get through. So we will answer them on the website, and we'll send you a link. There will be a number of posts on social media this week. Feel free to share them. We want to get this out as far and wide as possible. And all these webinars will be recorded and they'll be on the website. And there's another 2 Wednesday and Thursday, and then Friday there's one around domestic abuse as well. So some really interesting things coming up. So yeah, I just want to say thank you, everyone. We'll answer any questions, but I hope you enjoyed today's session.
Thank you, everyone.
You for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Paula, is the recording being stopped?
Not yet, it's still on.